I love this conversation with Erica. She has so much goodness to share about how we approach the world around us that starts with our own self reflection and self discovery. And then make sure that you stick around to the end because I'm going to share with you a shift that I am making in this business and an offer that you definitely don't want to miss out on. Hey there, my sister, my friend. Welcome to the Dr. Tanya B podcast with me, Dr. Tanya B. I am here to help you be your best, most authentic self, your life, your way. We're going to talk everything self care, self love, mindset, and personal growth with a splash of hippie woo. I am proud of you for giving yourself this time today, so let's not waste time and let's dig in. I am so excited about this conversation. It's going to be so good. In our just couple of minutes of prep, we keep catching ourselves and have to step back and be like, wait, we need to get this recorded. So I have with me today Erica Blackburn. She is a spiritual healer and mentor. Her work so closely aligns to what I do and what I believe and brings us a splash of the hippie woo that I absolutely love talking about. So I think that you're going to enjoy this message just as much as me. And then I think sort of twofold before I let Erica actually say something um, to bring to your attention, or there are a couple of things. I think that this conversation will go so hand in hand with everything that we've already talked about in this podcast and on the summit, if you caught the summit, because when I am talking about most of the work that I'm doing, I'm talking about self care from the lens of emotional intelligence. And one of those categories within emotional intelligence comes down to reflection. And when you are able and have the ability to reflect and think about who you are, what you do, how you're impacting the world, how they're receiving you, and make no mistake, I'm not saying that you need to adjust how you're being received, but you have to understand that so that you can figure out how to be the person that you want to be and you are showing up the person that you were hoping to be, then you also have to be able to do what Erica specializes in, which is self discovery and self evolution, which then leads us to this authenticity. But one of the things that Eric and I were talking about was in the Empower Her Self Care Summit, which is still open for a couple of more weeks. It's the link for that is www.drtanyab.com/summit. I almost forgot /summit. And so it's still open. It's completely free. There are 12 speakers. But one of the things that Eric and I were just talking about is I love so much. So we ended up so far with over 160 people registering and participating in this summit. I absolutely love that. It's so amazing that 160 people would come out for this, but also it is heartbreaking and heart-wrenching that for me, our world is in such a state that 160 people need the help in taking care of themselves and prioritizing themselves and figuring out how to find their own happiness, that they came out to sign up for this and they came out to engage with us. And so I think that this conversation is going to be absolutely powerful and adding just one more layer to the conversations that we were having in the summit. So all of that to say, Erica, I'm so excited that you are here.
I'm so excited to be here.
Fantastic. So why don't we just start with you just telling us your story. Tell us what you do, maybe a little bit about how you got there.
Yeah, I would love to. So yes, I am a spiritual healer and mentor, and I mostly work with women. I've worked with lots of different people, but mostly I work with women who are leaders, who are professionals, who are service providers, who are really looking to have more ease in their life, more energy, and more empowerment, like really being in their own power, so that they can have the life that they desire, that they know is in their heart, and share their light and inspire others to bring their light out into the world as well. I truly believe, I love this quote that a rising tide lifts all boats.
Mhm.
And that is like authentically what my work is about, like helping women to be raised up so that the people that they support, the people that they influence can also be raised up. I really feel like we can all lift each other.
There
Um,
it is. Yep.
and my work really began, I mean, when you and I were chatting beforehand, I was sharing that it really came into this world with me. And, often, we all experience what's called like loss of original nature. And so that kind of takes us away from our authenticity. And we come out into the world and we're drawn kind of out of our midline. And I think for me, I always had spiritual gifts and, things would come to me in dreams and I would talk to nature when I was a child. And then you grow up into the world and you start to be drawn into other things. And sometimes that can take us away from who we really are. And so I went into the business world, and while I loved it, there was also a calling to share this spiritual work and this healing work with people on a bigger, in a bigger way than I could do when I was simply doing it in the evenings or on the weekends. Like I really wanted to do it as my full work in the world. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years full time, but I've been doing this work for over 12 years. And so just every day it becomes more exciting to
I
help people
love
in this
that.
way. Because
Yeah.
as you were saying, like the world is open to it more and more, and the
Hmm.
world needs it more and more because levels of burnout, levels of stress, levels of dysregulation are so high
Hmm.
right now in our world that we need more of how to care for ourselves. We might have known it sometime, or maybe no one ever taught us. And
Hmm.
so now we get to learn that together.
Yeah, that's so amazing. You said so many of my favorite words. Ease, the word ease. Ease and grace is one of my sayings. Just ease and grace, my friends. We don't have to do this the hard way. We just do it. Empower, take your power back. Like that's one of the things I think that it's so important. So I'm actually doing a workshop this coming week. I think this podcast will have been launched after the summit or the masterclass starts, but I'm calling it Reclaim Your Power because that's really what it's all about. Is this is all about what you want, about you setting your expectations, you deciding what you want those outcomes to look like. Because I think that so many times, exactly what you were just talking about, we're born with this thing, especially if you're empathetic or you have high intuition. So you're born with, I'm going to call it a gift. I'm not sure that everybody would. It's just who I am, right? This is my sparkle. And I think as we get older and those expectations come in and the world sort of surrounds us, we lose that. We dim that sparkle a little bit. And so we're afraid to step out and say I'm a little bit different, or my beliefs are a little bit different, or we just forget that those were there because the expectation now has become that this is the thing that I have to do, whether it is college and career or whatever that looks like for you. But we just forget that we've got that sort of thing that we could be leaning into. So I love that. So tell me, what does the word authenticity mean to you?
Mm. Yeah, I think this is such a great question because I think authenticity can be unique for each of us. But for me, it really means like the truest version of ourselves, the truest version of our heart. And I feel like for me, when I'm in quiet moments, when I am surrounded by nature, when I'm in moments of joy, I can really reconnect with that. And so then when I am in moments of stress or frustration or feeling far away from that moment of authenticity, it can also be the contrast that reminds me, like, wait, this isn't who I really am. And
Mm-hmm.
I really have moments of that through my life. I remember one time years ago, I was having a conversation with a partner at the time, and there was frustration in the conversation, and I literally felt myself like hovering above my body and seeing the conversation and feeling like this is not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I've
Mm-hmm.
had moments like that throughout my life, and I'm not sure if your listeners are resonating with that
Mm-hmm.
too,
I
where
do.
like right, where like we have these
Yeah.
moments of contrast. So I sometimes
Mm-hmm.
think that we especially on our journey to come back to our authentic self, however we might define that, I feel like sometimes the moments of contrast are what show us the most, like, wait, this is who I really am.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, in those moments of contrast, what I would come back to, like my authentic self, is really that part of me that is spirit, like really that part of me that is awakened and aware and like knows what she wants and knows why she's here on this planet. Um, And over the years of doing this work, I have tried to foster that in myself more and more.
Mhm.
And then that has allowed me to help other people to bring that out in themselves more and more. So the more that I go on that journey, the more that I'm able to help others on that journey. But yeah, I don't know that I don't know that I have one definition of the word authentic, but for me,
Yeah.
it really is a feeling. It really is a
Mhm.
sense. It really is like an embodiment. Like, this is me authentic. This is me not authentic.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And so I love the word authenticity, and I love talking about it and helping people understand that. But I think the downside is it's become such a trendy term that it's hard for people. Like it's just this, sort of hippie woo off the cuff thing that people are not stopping and really thinking about. And you nailed so many things in in that little 30 seconds or minute of where I think this whole conversation is going, right? So you talked about like the contrast. So for me, when I recognize I am not being my authentic self, almost always I'm lashing out in temper. Like I've lost my temper with somebody, and almost always it's one of my like probably my college age son because he pushes every button that I have. But even like raising the boys and having because we always had a lot of animals and like a house full of chaos, and I would always every single time that I would realize that I'm not doing the thing that I should do or the thing that I feel good about, it's because I've lost my temper and reacted in a way that I don't know if I'm ashamed of it, but it's not the way I should have done that. And I don't feel good about it. And so I think that then brings us back to identity. And so I'm not identifying with that. And I don't identify with that, or I don't know what I want to identify with, or what the definition of that is. And that's a lot of the women that I am working with are struggling to figure out what is their identity because they have had these seasons of life where I was a student and then I was a wife and then I was a mother and then I was a professional and then I especially as the kids because this is more closely aligned to where I'm at in my season of life is the kids are then leaving the nest and I am married or not married anymore depending on the situation or but I'm sorry I am Scott we're happily married at 28 years and so but what's now happening is all of the kids are leaving and I'm still professional, I'm still doing all of the things, I'm working very hard, but who am I and what makes me happy? And I think that a lot of the women that I know that a lot of the women that I work with are struggling with that in some realm. And I think that then brings us back around to this self-discovery and self-evolution so that we can understand the identity so that we can live authentically. I
Yeah.
feel like I just threw on all the trendy words in one sentence. Look at me go.
Well, I love what you say. I love words. I
Me
love
too.
the
Me
meaning
too.
of words. I love the
Mhm.
definition of words. And I agree that we're drawn, like I think about it like a horizontal line and a vertical line. I'm a meditator. Meditation is a medicine
Same.
for me, like really,
Same. Yep.
really a deep practice. And I think about like when I'm sitting in my meditation seat, sometimes I like to sit in a chair in my office. Um, and we're kind of lengthened, our crown chakra is facing the sky, facing the heavens, and we can receive that connection. And
Hmm.
then we go out into the world and we're pulled into this like horizontal line, like you were describing, all these different roles, all these different
Mm-hmm.
hats that we wear. And
Hmm.
sometimes if we don't have enough time or space or even know how to come back to that vertical line, and I literally think about that vertical line as the authentic self. So, however
Mm.
I might define it with words, I really imagine it like when my shoulders are stacked over my hips and I'm sitting or I'm standing and I am in my center of power, that in my midline, like that is where I feel the authenticity. And that's where I can tell, oh, I'm being drawn out of that space. And these emotions are what I'm
Hmm.
experiencing, or I'm being drawn back from that space. And these are the emotions that come up. And then I think our emotions can then be that guidepost to bring us back to our authentic self if we're not sure how else to find it. I do
Yep.
find that women tend to be more connected with their emotions or feel more comfortable using the word emotions and feelings and at least like having a desire to know themselves in that way more. And so that can be our guidance back to authentic self if we do feel pulled out of our center line, out of our authentic self, out of that vertical line into the world and the roles and all these different identities that we're either taught we're supposed to be, told we're supposed to be, or have just done for so long that we start to think that is who we are or what we are.
Mm-hmm. That analogy is fascinating to me. I never really thought about that, but as you're describing it, that is exactly how I feel. And like, especially over the last 5 to 10 years, as I feel like I've come in, I'm a late bloomer, I'm going to say, but I feel like I've come into my own alignment, which has allowed me and then it took me a minute after I realized what I should be doing, what I want to be doing, and some of the training that I had done. And then finding that level of comfort to put myself out there without feeling like I was going to be judged. I was judged, but now I've gotten to the point that I don't care about that. Like that doesn't matter because my emotional intelligence has allowed me to move beyond the fear of that and just not necessarily even considering what does somebody else think about that because it's what's making me happy. But I feel like as you were describing it, I was like, yes, that's exactly what has happened. And I'm also a huge meditator and I use hypno meditation in a lot of the work that I'm doing. And so that makes good sense to me. And there was something else that you talked about that I was like, ooh, I need to talk about that. And I already forget what it was because I got so excited I didn't write it down. Oh, I know what it is.
Okay.
So you were talking about how women then use like their own emotional intelligence to start to figure this out. So what modalities do you use and how do you start to introduce this to women that you are working with so that they can start to feel comfortable maybe in their own skin if that's what they're struggling with, or how do they start to move forward?
Yeah. I love this question. I really feel like we often have to start with concept. And again, going back to language and loving language, like, okay, how am I defining emotion? How am I defining emotional
Mm.
intelligence? So I do find that because probably the people who are listening right now are like very brilliant, intelligent, amazing women,
I
we
hope.
often start with like, how do I understand this? How do I know this as a concept?
Hmm.
Um, and so that can really start with first understanding that emotional intelligence is being able to recognize emotions in ourselves and others, being able to regulate our own emotions and even co-regulate with another, and being able to then respond from that place. Responding meaning that we have the ability to recognize and regulate, so we can respond, versus if we can't recognize and can't regulate, then we might be reacting
Hmm.
versus responding. So I think first step is just to know that conceptually.
Yeah.
And to also know that part of how I work with people in that conceptual piece is like helping them understand even how the brain works, that we have the reptilian brain, which is like 500,000 years old, and the limbic brain, where that emotional piece comes from, which is like 250,000 years old, and then the analytical brain, which is like 75,000 years old. So if we think about that, it's like, well, of course, we're going to want to react first. Like that
Hmm.
is our human instinct. And then the emotions kick in, and then the logic kicks in. So it's just like a normal process for all humans
So
that
true.
is
Right.
how it goes.
Yep.
And I think that's helpful too, because we want to normalize, like I like to be able to normalize for people, like we're all having this experience. And
Hmm.
when we think about the part of our brain that is, the analytical or logical part, it's still a baby. It's still young compared to the other parts of our brain. So we all, I think, have to give ourselves, like you said, grace that this is literally part of human evolution as well as like self-discovery evolution. So once people understand that, it's a little bit then easier, I find, to then say, okay, and here's some tools or ways that we can work with this. Like I do find that information is helpful first. That's a brief summary.
I
I think that
100% agree with that. You can't teach me anything until I get the big picture of it. So I absolutely agree with that.
big picture. And then
Hmm.
it's also helpful, I think, for people to understand that we all have different energy blueprints, is what I call them.
Hmm.
Um, and so we can look at those energy blueprints from different lenses. But ultimately, we will often have a predominant emotion that we are each leading with, whether it be grief, whether it be anger, whether it be fear. And so it's helpful to even be able to notice that in ourselves. What is the emotion I tend to go to under stress? And just to be able to answer that question and track that in ourself in our daily life. Um, that can help us too, because then we can understand where we're falling on like an emotional regulation scale. We
Mhm.
can help ourselves move from that place to where we want to be, which, is often the opposite, or at least more neutral than that emotion. And we can also say, like, what is the wisdom in that emotion? Like, if it's anger, what is the action that this anger is wanting me to take? If it is
Right.
fear, like, what am I ultimately, what is the fear? What am I afraid of? Like, it, once we kind of know our dominant emotion, it's easier for us to then do a bit more of that self-discovery and inquiry, so we can actually do something with it rather than looking at all emotions, because that can be a bit overwhelming. Like, oh, now I need to be equipped to understand every single one of my emotions. Just start with the dominant one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I like to bring in practices that help people to come to the present moment, because I find, well, first of all, if no one's read this book, or maybe people have, a reread, I would suggest a reread of The Untethered Soul. I feel like that book, Michael Singer describes the experience of emotions in the present moment so thoroughly. I literally remember reading it and having a light bulb, like, oh my gosh, why did I not know this? And it opened up like a vortex for me to understand and explore emotions more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
So I would really highly recommend that book for those that haven't read it. So he talks about, if we can truly feel the emotion that we're experiencing, and again, many of us have a dominant one that we tend to lean to,
Mm-hmm.
um, in the present moment that it's occurring, then it doesn't have to get stored in our body for like a later date to be healed and resolved. So helping people to come to the present moment is a big part, I find, of working with emotional regulation, working with authenticity. And one of the easiest ways that I think that can be accomplished, if we're just talking about like a quick practice, is literally body tapping, like actually just tapping on our body, tapping on our torso, tapping on our arms, tapping on our legs
Mm-hmm.
while we're naturally breathing. And maybe our breath might deepen and lengthen a bit more because now we are doing something that has us focused. But
Mm-hmm.
I would literally just start there with people. We're
Fantastic.
talking about like top of the iceberg.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Right.
and I immediately want to dig in
Okay,
to
great.
all of the things. So, when you're talking about tapping, are you digging deep, like emotional freedom technique and using the affirmations along with, or like the other? So, I've done that. Sorry, I got just twisted up there. So, I've done that, but then I've also just along with qigong and energy movement, just exactly what you're saying. You just tap along your body because then you're releasing some of those. Because I actually wrote down healed and resolved as you were talking, because that's exactly what happens, right? If you allow that emotion, if somebody said something to you, if somebody did something to you, if you felt a certain way and you don't resolve that, or you allow that to just sit on you versus releasing that, then it festers and then it grows and it grows and it grows and grows until you've got this thing that you're not sure why this thing is happening, why this feeling is happening, and you're not recognizing now you've got this limiting belief or this challenge or this roadblock that you can't get rid of, and this is why. So I will sometimes do that along the lines of qigong, and then again, just shaking and moving your body, hitting it on certain points to get to let that release happen. So, are you talking about one or either or both of those things, or something completely different?
All of the above, and
I
I will
had a
flush it
feeling.
out. So I do first and foremost like to teach simplicity, because I do find
Mhm,
that, because many
mhm,
people, again, I'm sure listeners can agree that there's just so much coming at people. There's so much information. There's so data overload, information overload,
yep,
and just so many distractions, like everything vying for our attention. So I
mhm,
like to start simple. And so in terms of like level of simplicity, just that full body tapping, or like just literally tapping on the torso, is where I
mhm.
like to start. Then for people that work with me a little bit longer term, yes to emotional freedom tapping, that emotional freedom technique, that tapping that goes with that, with
Mhm,
affirmations, yes.
mhm.
There's another tapping technique that I teach called cortices, which
Oh, I
is
don't even know
specifically
that one.
tapping. Yeah, it's
Ooh.
specifically tapping on the brain, like the brain in the head, the brain in the heart, and the brain in the gut.
Ah.
So that's a great one. And then specific techniques to regulate the nervous system, especially for those of us that have experienced trauma, because I think there can be I think, a slightly
Mhm.
different conversation around emotions if we have had trauma versus
Mhm.
if we haven't. And not the level of the traumatic experience, but
Yeah.
if it was ongoing, you know what I mean? Like that brings a
Mhm.
different complexity. So
Mhm.
I do like to take into consideration that not all techniques are made equal depending on the experiences that we have had. And
Mhm.
our emotions are not all experienced equally depending on the experiences that we've had and how
Mhm.
complex the trauma may be.
Mhm.
And so in that case, I like to go more into tapping techniques that specifically address trauma and can help to support that at a deeper level.
Mhm.
But I do find that the practice of, simply tapping on our torso is a good starting place, and then we
Mhm.
can kind of customize from there.
Yeah.
And I can send you a link to the cortices tapping
Oh, I
video.
would love
I
that.
Okay, great. I can share that.
Fantastic.
That
Yeah.
is a great one because it involves all parts of the brain, like the reptilian, the limbic, and the analytical part of our brain, as well as the brain and our heart and the brain and our gut. So it does kind of give that fuller body experience. Yeah, so there's lots of tapping that I love to do.
Yeah, and I will tell you, so when I say qigong and tapping, people will be like, "Ooh, I don't know how to do that." And it sounds very like martial arts and something that I'm probably not going to be able to do. It's really it's almost a smaller form of tai chi, or and I say smaller, it doesn't mean smaller, but like it's an easy breath work movement, super gentle. And when you add some tapping to that and you just add the breath work in this very light movement, I have had people, and it's very much along the lines of like a massage therapy, right? You do this and you release some things, and for the next couple of days, you might not feel very good. And so I will have people, and I'll, with the first time they do it with me, like make sure that you drink some water for the next 12 hours or so, because if we release something, you're going to feel that, and it's going to feel like you had the flu, or something is not great, when really it's exactly it. It's your lymph system has just released something into your body that feels very toxic, and it's hard to understand. I think that that's an emotion, like we just something that we just let go of that was so incredibly powerful. And while it didn't feel good in the moment, it feels amazing when you can get through that.
Yeah. It really does because um when we are able, and it can be a journey, like it can be a
Mhm.
year-long journey, a decade journey, it could be a
Mhm.
lifetime journey depending on our experiences of um learning emotional intelligence, applying it. Like I literally think, much like, our mutual love of meditation, like that's a lifetime practice. That's not like a
Mhm.
one and done. That is like
Mhm.
a lifetime study application practice. And I do think emotional intelligence, um, as it relates to our self-discovery and our self-evolution, like this is a lifetime and beyond
Mhm.
experience, but I do think every effort we make toward it does create that ripple effect. And
Mhm.
so, whatever access point we have, if
Yep.
it's a little bit of tapping, if it's a little bit of breathing, like 5 minutes in our day, like it will start to create a ripple effect that
Mhm.
will impact us and then also, the others that we love and are
Oh,
okay.
yes. So this is one of the things I struggle with when I talk about self-care, is that especially when you're working with women who are either parents, or they've got a career, or they've got aging parents that they're now taking care of. They've got all of these things. They've got community and service that's very important to them. And so they struggle with putting themselves first and making any kind of priority. And the thing that there's one quote, and people have heard me say this a million times. It was a blogger by the name of Katie Reed who says self-care is not giving the world the rest of you, it is giving the world the best of you. And so you have to stop and create that level. And I keep trying to, like, how do I say this so that it resonates with people? That you have to be a priority in order for you to take care of everyone else. And so I have come up with things along the lines of like, the best ROI that you can have on any investment is taking care of yourself. But there's another just like fun one that is, if you really want to shine, if you can shine, everyone around you will sparkle. So it's just about that vibe that you put out to the world, right? Like the energetic vibe that you have. If you are a parent or a manager or a leader and you are taking care of people and you are sitting low and you are not feeling good and you don't even recognize, because I did this for a period of time when I went through postpartum depression after one of the boys. I thought I was hiding it. I didn't think the rest of the world could see it. They all saw it. Everybody around me knew it. But my story that I was telling myself was that this is not impacting my kids. It is very important to me to be a good mom, and I'm not allowing it to sort of work its way in there. I'm a career woman and I am managing that too, and I'm not allowing it. It was hitting everybody. I just wasn't allowing myself to recognize it. And so as soon as I stopped and started taking care of myself and allowing that to happen and saying, okay, I have to be a priority now. And that's when this whole journey started. So Trey was 19 at that time, or he's 19 now. So he was 1 when I started that journey. Um, Everything shifted in my entire life. And that's where I recognized that emotional intelligence is so important. And that is where having the highest IQ in the room does not make you the smartest person in the room. If you can navigate and you can, because I worked in the world of IT for a while, and they might have been smarter than me on the IQ scale, but they couldn't get their information to people that in a way that they would understand it. And so I often would catch myself playing the intermediary, like, no, this is what he's saying. Oh, this is what they need. No, but this is what he's saying. Oh, but this is what they need, because the emotional intelligence wasn't there for them. And so if you want to be successful, you've got to stop. You've got to do this exploration, this reflection, so that you can discover who you are, who you want to be, and how you sort of get there. I don't know how I just wrapped that all up in one shot. I wasn't even intending to go there, but I just, it's so important for you to stop and take care of yourself so that everyone around you is better taken care of.
Now, this brings up a topic I'm very passionate about,
Bring it.
which is self-leadership, because I really feel like in our very masculine world, there's the idea of leadership and power is so, again, horizontal. It's taking us out of our midline. And women have such a beautiful, natural ability to lead through the guidance of their emotions, through the guidance of their intuition. And I don't know that is like yet fully embraced by the full planet, but I do feel like it is growing more and more. And when we invest, whether it's time or money or energy, into ourself and leading ourself, and women are so beautifully powerful in very big, powerful ways, but also in subtle ways and in gentle ways, like a gentle current in the ocean that actually has a lot of power. I feel like businesses benefit, communities benefit. Like we literally can create and co-create things that were not even possible. Like we didn't know them to be possible. They're in the ethers, they're possible, but we didn't realize the level of possibility until we start even just giving a couple minutes a day to ourselves. And I do have compassion for myself and you and all of us, because for many of us, we were brought up to be polite and to please others, and and that's not just even in our decades of being on the planet. That is like, going back hundreds of years, thousands of years. And so I feel like there is a bit of that programming in our nervous system from a survival level. But in our modern world, it's no longer helping us to survive, to put everybody first, because our modern world, we are doing many things. We are doing possibly all of the things. And it just no longer can we put everyone else first as part of our survival. Like actually to survive and thrive, we do need to be at the center of our circle and
Oh
our
my
life.
gosh. That whole thing is so good, and I'm telling you what, you're gonna have to come back so that we can do a second podcast just on that,
I would love
because
to.
this is where it immediately took me is you're 100% right. Like we feel like we have to be tough, but then we get called names for being too tough, and like if you're too assertive or too aggressive, then that doesn't land well. But there's this whole other side of it, and I also, like you, work primarily with women, but I also work with a lot of college women. And so, and a lot of them, the college that I work with is a trades-based school primarily. And so these are women that are in non-traditional careers, or at least aspiring to be. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time talking to this group about is, and you talked a little bit about this, and I think it was before we started recording, when you shared your saying that you love so much. Was that, do you remember, was that before we started recording? I think it
No,
was.
I think it was when about the passing
The
time.
ship. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, that was
Were we
while we
recording?
were recording. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So anyways, because it relates to that. So what I talk to this group of women especially about is that this is your network. These are your peers. These are the people that you're going to move out into the world with and have connection with. One, but two, if you're busy cutting other people down and not taking care of one another, you're only going to get so far. At some point, that's going to be recognized that you are not a team player, first of all, and then second of all, that you sort of siloed yourself because this is the skill set that you have. But if you are willing to embrace and work with and collaborate, your silo just got so much larger, and the power that you then bring. And so if you are working with and collaborating and just supporting one another, you are going to get so much further than if you are sort of cutting all of the women off at the knees that are around you. It's just not going to work for you in the long run. It's not sustainable. So that is one of the things I talk about. And I think that those things work really well together. So I think we need to come back and talk about that sometime.
I love that. And I really do feel like it actually ties in nicely with emotional intelligence in our conversation today, because it's like I love the word collaboration. It was
Mhm.
one of my favorite
Same.
words, one of my values. And it's actually really difficult to collaborate if we're not in a ventral vagal state in our nervous system. Like if we're not
Mm.
emotionally regulated, it is really difficult to collaborate.
Yeah,
We're looking at many things as like, is it danger? Is it a threat? Not from our, again, not from our analytical brain, but from that,
right.
the reptilian
No,
part of
it
us.
takes us back. I was thinking the chakras, like my if my root
Yes.
chakra is not balanced, I don't feel safe and secure, and then I might have anger and jealousy, and so I don't want to work with Erica because she might outshine me, and that's not that. No, no, we're gonna lift each other up, and we're gonna come through this better because we did that.
Yes, that's so true. And this is why it's beautiful, because um, the way that emotions then are tied to energy,
Mm-hmm.
and how emotions are
Oh, there's a
energy.
third podcast.
Yes, we're gonna have a series. And I feel like this then can, I think there's a bit more comfort talking about emotional regulation and emotional
Mhm.
intelligence in like the world today, in the corporate world
Yep.
today. And then we hear the word energy and it's like, whoa, are
Too
we
far,
getting,
too far.
but really emotions are linked with our energy, and it's such a
Mhm.
nice bridge to be able
Mhm.
to say, oh, and then we also have these energy centers, and we have this
Mhm.
prana running through our body. And then that's another way to be able to connect with self-care. So then self-care can be as simple as a breath. It can be
Mhm.
as simple as placing our hand on one of our energy centers, maybe on our heart. Like, I think sometimes it can feel like, wow, these are such big topics, like
Yeah. But we don't have
emotional.
to overcomplicate them,
That's
right?
right. It can be in a moment, and then those moments can grow.
Mhm.
The more that we do them, we feel safe and comfortable with them. It's like, oh, let me have a little bit more of that in my life. And then before we know it, we are prioritizing self-care, because it actually does feel really good.
Does. Oh, it does feel so good. And then you'll notice, like I was saying earlier, when you take care of you, then you start noticing the people that are in your circle start feeling better and living at a little bit of a higher vibration. And then the people around them start to do the same. And then the people around them start to do the same. So it sort of cascades its way out and just becomes absolutely amazing.
Yes, it really does. That ripple effect is my favorite. That's my
Same.
favorite thing
Same.
about working with women, because I just feel like we are so generous at I mean, every humans are all generous, but because
Mhm.
women have that natural
The
tendency
nurturer, yeah.
to nurture, to want to build community, like
Mhm.
when we are cared for well by ourselves and each other, it literally does allow us to make such an important impact. And I mean, we're seeing
Mhm.
that in the world. We're seeing how women that are in the media like are able to make such a large impact because they're caring for themselves and they have those that can care for them too. Um,
Mhm.
and then I just feel like for women that are listening and they are, working in management and they have children and they're just like, but is it possible for
It's too
me?
much.
You know? And it
Yep.
is, and it's like
Mhm.
starting with maybe this conversation, starting with maybe one nugget from this
Mhm.
conversation and
Yep.
just applying that.
Mhm.
It can start small and then that ripple effect can become wider and wider and wider to the point that we might
Yeah.
not even know the level of effect and influence that we're having.
Yeah.
Um,
Agreed.
but I
Yep.
do notice that in my experience, as I have worked with my own emotional intelligence, it has also made it really clear who is to be in my life and who is to not be in my life.
Oh, that's so good.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
because I
And it
think
turns out you don't need them all. You don't.
that can be part of self-care too,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Especially for, if someone listening has a tendency toward putting others first to the detriment of themselves or people pleasing to the detriment of themselves. It's like
Mhm.
once you start to put more care into yourself, it is easier to make decisions about like who is really providing
Yeah.
nurturing in a
Yeah.
reciprocal way.
Yeah. You set standards. It doesn't become aggressive or volatile, but you set standards for what you're willing to accept and what you're willing to receive and not receive.
Yes. And
Mhm.
actually that is a beautiful point because our standards are either happening unconsciously or we're consciously creating them. And I think that we can use our emotions. We can use our emotions to decide what we put the energy of emotions into, what we do emotionalize, whether it
Mhm.
is leaning in the direction of what we want, what we desire, what we're moving toward, or the things we don't want and what we're actually trying
Mhm.
to move away from. Like that is another piece of emotional intelligence that I think um, doesn't get talked about as much because it's a bit more of an energy and like a manifesting component. But
Mhm.
I think for our purposes, you and I love to
So
talk about
good.
those
So
things.
good.
So this is a good space to discuss it. Then we get to harness like, wait, what am I putting energy and emotion into? And is it creating the results in my life that I want to
Mhm.
see?
Mhm.
And then we can decide from there.
Yes. And
Mm.
I'll bring that back to at the very beginning of our conversation when we were talking about emotional intelligence. It was who set your expectations, who decided what those outcomes should be. Was it you? Was it somebody else? And again, to those standards, where do they need to go? I think, Erica, that you and I could continue this conversation for probably another 2 hours because there were three things that I was like, oh, wait, I want to get in on that. And then I'm no, we need to wrap this one up and we may need to come back and do this again. But before we wrap this up, is there something that you wanted to share with the audience today?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, we shared a lot of great nuggets and takeaways. So
100%.
you might have
Yeah.
gotten something from this conversation that you're ready to go and run with. If you're wanting a bit more support, other resources, there are two options. So you can go to my YouTube channel, which is Erica Blackburn, simply Erica Blackburn, spiritual healer and mentor. And there are healing resources, yoga resources there. And if you go to my website, ericablackburn.com, on the very front page of my website, the very top of the front page, there's a 5-step guide to successful healing. So that provides 5 additional resources if you want a bit more to provide self-care
I
for
love
yourself
that.
and for your emotional care.
I love that. I think that'll be so helpful because I think we did just scratch the surface. And so that'll be a place for people to start digging in as well. So I will include those in the notes. They'll be in the show notes. And so everyone can connect to the links. Woo, that was rough. Um, but Erica, I love this conversation so much. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This has been a delight, and I'm just so, so grateful for you and for your facilitation of this conversation.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. Friends, how great was that? Definitely check out Erica's 5 Steps to Emotional Healing. The link for that is in the notes. And then here's the other thing that I really wanted to share with you. If you know me and have spent any kind of time with me, you know that I have this major calling to do this business, but I have struggled with exactly what is the business. I've spent a good amount of time and energy refusing to call myself a coach and be not willing to lean into that style of work. And then recently, I've had this pretty major revelation. One you all probably had quite some time ago about me, but my own stubbornness has not allowed me to sort of lean in and to see that. And that is that what you actually want from me is one-on-one coaching. That is what you are calling me for. That is what you are coming to me for. And I'm doing it. I'm just not calling it that. And I'm sort of doing it on the side of the other things that I'm doing. And so my recent reflections tell me that it is time to get out of my own way and to lean into what my actual strengths and skills and calling are. And so I'm going to open some one-on-one coaching spots. I have never done this before, but I've been doing the work and seeing the benefits that you get when we do this work. And so I'm going to price it super affordably because I want to get really comfortable with just the model and the concepts that I'm doing and running as we get it off the ground. But that crazy low pricing is not going to be around forever. So make sure that you get in on this pretty quickly. There is an interest form on my website at www.drtanyab.com. You can fill that out or just reach out to me. If you are feeling stuck or overwhelmed or like you are drowning in responsibility, like you have lost yourself and cannot make the time to feel better, or if you are feeling anxious and just feel frozen or not sure how to move forward, then sister, I am your girl. We will assess, we will bring in the hippie woo energy work, we will remove your roadblocks, and we will get you on the right track. All so that you can be better, feel better, and do better. So reach out. My email is info@drtanyab.com. Love you. Talk soon.